Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just wrapped up our interview with one of our good friends, Russ Morgan, founders and partners of Wealth Without Wallstreet. Anthony, what was a takeaway or two that you had?
You know, what we wanted to do is we're going to take a little time out of our normal podcast and do a series of what we call How They Did It. And what we're going to be doing is just talking to average normal people and how they made that switch to, instead of focus on accumulating assets, to creating financial freedom, like Robert Kiyosaki states, where your passive income is more than your monthly expenses. So that's what we're diving in here today. Now, Cam, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, I actually had two. I mean, if you listen to this, as you listen to this episode, there's a ton of good information. They don't call him the idea guy for nothing. Right? Yeah. Ton of great knowledge there. But there's two things. The first one was he said, learn who you are as an investor. And I thought that was great, is because not everything out there is for you. Right? So there's a lot of things that get hot, right, at certain times. We always call them shiny coins or those things, whether it's crypto or short-term rentals, is it's not always a good fit for you. And so what I liked what he said was, figure out who you are and then dive deep. Get a whole bunch of education on that topic before you move forward. And then the second takeaway I had was, you and I have been doing this for a while, but he had a new terminology that I'd never heard. And it was a bunny hill policy. But it was, hey, man, let's just get something to where you can get started. One of the biggest reservations that a lot of people have or concerns is, how much do I put into this thing when they get started? And, we tell people all the time, it's not about the money. It's just about the process and getting familiar with it.
I tell you, for me, there were some great things, but probably one thing that stuck out is Russ actually publishes what his passive income is each month. And last month it was $40,000. Now, Cameron, but he started out as a typical financial planner. He was a CFP. Cameron, how many CFPs do you imagine are making $40,000 a month in passive income?
I would say zero or very few.
I would say zero, as long as you're not counting, the Wall Street fees that they're taking off the mutual funds that they sell.
Sure.
Right. But actually investments that they actually made, I would say none. And to me, I thought it was very interesting how not only did he was brought up in the typical thinking of Wall Street, he actually was in it and was having people do it. But you look at his income then to where it is now, world of difference.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we talk about money and financial freedom and that dollars, but what we don't talk about is what hitting financial freedom can mean or feel like. And he's talked about now he views his job as passion income, right? So he has his passive income and then his passion income, because now he works because he wants to, not because he has to. So the things he's doing, he's very passionate about. And if he wasn't, he's in a position where he doesn't have to do it. And what I also thought was interesting was how he shared how he was teaching his kids about money and how they started their own business, and what he did, I thought was just awesome.
Yeah. Great. I'm sure your listeners will enjoy it.
Enjoy the episode.
Take care. All right, guys, welcome. We've got Russ back in the studio. He's back again joining us on Infinite Wealth Podcast. Russ, we're excited to have you back.
Yeah, man. Must have done something right the first time. Get a return appearance.
Absolutely. Provide a ton of value, had a lot of good feedback. And today we're just going to dive right into it. Russ, if you could kind of take us back on maybe how your view on money has changed over the years.
Yes, I think early on in my career, because I was a certified financial planner, right?
Sorry about that.
That's a dirty word around here, isn't it?
Yep.
My thought is that I should hand over money to people smarter than me that could help my clients get more of it back, right? It's the accumulation approach.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest change that I've had is not only should we not hand over our money to other people, but we should not be trying to accumulate money for a future date. We should actually be trying to create cash flow on a daily, monthly basis.
Now, how did you get to that transition? Like, what changed your thought process?
Well, I mean, the initial adjustment happened whenever we were sitting there in 2008, 2009, and we were seeing our investment accounts down 40-50% and had no idea as to why they went down nor what was going to keep them from going down again. And I would say also a lot of reading, just a lot of self-introspection, was trying to understand what wealthy people were doing with money. And at the time, I was working with people very similar to me, didn't have a whole lot of money. And so, we were all taught, well, you should accumulate to some large number. If you had $4 million in your 401k, you're set, right? And when I was looking around at what really successful people were doing, they were creating businesses, they were creating cash flows from real estate and other things. And I thought, wow, isn't that more sustaining? Like if you go through a downturn, if you have cash flow that comes from something that you don't work in, you have a lot more freedom. You have a lot more security in your job. So for me, like I saw a lot of people without security. I saw a lot of people with a lot of fear. And I thought, man, the people who are not, or the people who's weathering the storm the most, are the ones who had cash flows coming in that didn't depend on their day job.
Now, when you look back, you said there's kind of that transition. Was there kind of a specific aha moment? I mean, I remember looking back at my life, and there were certain times where I very distinctly kind of remember having these ideas or this thoughts. Did that happen to you, or was it just more of a progression?
Yeah, I think a little bit of progression, right? For me, I say that, man, I was observing others and what they were doing, but I still didn't understand, right? Just watching others gives you vision, gives you ideas. But at the end of the day, you have to put yourself in a position that you can actually take advantage of opportunities. So I started putting cash in a place that I could access it. And ultimately, I got to a point where I could start telling it what to do.
Okay. And what was that place? I mean, if everybody on our podcast probably knows, but was that a new idea to put it somewhere different?
Yeah, I mean, you guys speak about this subject. I hear you all the time talking about the becoming your own banker strategy, infinite banking. And for me, I got an opportunity to listen to Nelson Nash, the author of that book. Yeah. And when he was talking about the way that you accumulate cash and it gives you the privilege and the opportunity to take advantage of opportunities that come around you, that was like, okay, great. Well, I need to put a lot more money in there because I started doing it, but I was just putting a little because I could only see a little. But as I started stacking more and more of my cash flow through it, then when I'm doing research, listening to podcasts like this one, I started getting ideas of, oh, well, maybe this is an approach. This is something I can do. And I would say a second part to that is ultimately I got to a point where I started understanding who I was as an investor. We all listen and read a lot of Robert Kiyosaki. He has a famous saying that says there's no good or bad investments. There are only good and bad investors. And I realized that I was a bad investor. Like the mistakes I'd made in real estate and even some business ventures I'd gone into had more to do with the fact that I didn't invest enough in my education financially in those specific spaces. And if I would have known more about myself, I probably wouldn't have taken some of the deals that I did.
I don't know if you want to share, but can you maybe share one or two of those that you may not have done?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? So I'll use one.
Maybe generically, like, right?
Well, I'm okay. I'll use one that most people would say, oh, I thought that was a really good one. So single family properties, right? So I had a friend of mine that had bought an apartment complex and turned it into condos. He comes to me and says, Russ, I've sold every one of them except this last unit. They're selling for $100,000 a piece. I'll give it to you for $85,000. I'm like, yeah.
Friends and family discount.
Right. I don't want to lose money on this thing. And he's like, look, here's the deal. You just hold it for a year or two, and then you can flip it probably for $110,000, $120,000. I was like, perfect. You know how much research I'd done in actually rental real estate at that point?
I think we just heard it.
Exactly. That was it.
Right?
That was it. So the property that I bought was not cash flowing, meaning that the rent that I had coming in was less than it cost me for the mortgage, even on the $85,000. Now, it made sense. It was like, well, I'm just a little under break even on the cash flow, but I'm going to have this, $20,000, $25,000 payday. Well, I bought that property in like December of 2006. You know what happened shortly thereafter, right? Well, not only did the place I bought it in, the university, it was in a college town, the university actually put about 1,000 units downtown. Oh, wow. Which dramatically increased the supply, reduced the demand for my property, which wasn't right on campus. And then obviously the crash. So the unit that I thought was worth 100, 110,000, ultimately there was units selling that same complex just 9 months later for like 60.
Oh, wow.
So there I am. I'm holding a property that I can't sell because I don't want to write a $20,000 check or more, and I'm losing money monthly. So that'd be one of the first examples I had of understanding, like even rental real estate, something that a lot of people make a lot of money in. You have to understand what you're doing, and I didn't.
One thing you had mentioned was you started reading these different books, and one of them was Becoming Your Own Banker.
Yep.
What were some of the other ones that helped you through this journey?
Well, I read a lot of books on business. So The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster by Darren Hardy, that was one of my favorites. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I started reading books on the way that you think, like Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man of Babylon. There are a lot of just basic financial books that I would have thought that I would have understood more about how money worked because I'd gone through all the financial education. Yeah. But really what I'd been taught was what the mutual fund and the stock market wanted to teach me, right? They were teaching me about market portfolio and, the beta of a portfolio and the standard deviation, all these terminologies that I thought made me wise in the way the market works. But the reality is I was just, in this little small fishbowl, not realizing that I was in the middle of a bunch of water because there I was just being fed from the man.
Yeah. What's some advice that you've gotten over the years that you might want to relay to some of our listeners?
I think the biggest thing for me is understanding that financial freedom comes when you have more passive income than you have monthly expenses. And for many of us, we don't even know what freedom means. We haven't taken the time to consider what opportunities would I take advantage of if I didn't have to trade time for money. And I think whenever I, sat down, I really had to answer that question of who did I need to become? What did I need to do or stop doing? And what are the things that I would want to have if I was financially free? It helped me see that it was a lot more than just tangible items, right? My ideal day and my ideal lifestyle were going to be dramatically different. What I mean by that is that, while one day I may enjoy sitting on the beach and watching my kids play, that's not an ideal lifestyle. I couldn't do that every single day. So for me, I needed to know like what was important to me. What were the things that I would want? And then not try to project those on everybody else. Like you got to know what you want. So that's why listening to others gives you ideas, but then you got to start applying it to yourself.
Now, one of the biggest obstacles when we're trying to invest and create financial freedom is capital or cash. So how did you accumulate or get the capital and cash you needed to do these passive income investments?
Well, quite candidly, I started getting really excited about what having cash available would do for me. And so I started saving way beyond my means. Like a lot of times people spend way beyond their means.
You don't hear that often.
I started saving. Like I started challenging myself to how much of my income could I start putting away. And of course, I like to spend money too. Okay, Cam?
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's been a year over the last 20 where my expenses have gone down. So that challenged me also to put a goal up there of how to increase my income.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to think differently, to challenge the status quo on everything. So the further, the more money I made, the more money I spent, but also the more money I saved. And I got to a point where I was saving, a fairly large six-figure amount of money, and it was all going to these life insurance policies that you guys teach about. And that cash started to stack up. And so then as I was learning different ideas about where I could put that money, it became real, right? When you have $10,000 saving an account, and now money's relative, but when an opportunity comes around, you need $50,000. You're like, okay, my $10,000 isn't enough. But when you get $50,000 and an opportunity comes around, it's $10,000. You're like, man, I could do that times 5.
Now, I have to imagine, typically, if you were a certified financial planner, you're probably following the advice that you gave your clients, and were putting a lot of your investing or what they thought were savings into 401ks and IRAs.
Well, here's the thing. I would say that when I first started out, like most financial advisors, I was just a glorified sales guy, right? I didn't make a whole lot of money, and I was advising people on things that I actually wasn't personally doing because I didn't have the money to do it. And I find that to be a real flaw in the financial industry, right? Yeah. Most of the people that make a lot of money are giving it to someone who makes a fraction of what they make. And unfortunately, they're telling them to do stuff that they're not doing. And I'm really transparent with people. I tell, I made a lot of mistakes early on, and I try to now share those mistakes. But also, what I've done of late is really tried to lead from the front, like be the guinea pig to share what I do. Every month we publish a report that shows all our passive income in the different places that we're doing it. And man, we're having some amazing success. One, I would attribute it to the fact that we created a goal, and that goal is just to publish it. And when you publish something, it makes you accountable to it, right? Yeah. Even if you just share it with your friend group. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out how could you be accountable, what sort of goal could you create? Well, create a goal and share it with 3 friends and ask them to follow up with you on a monthly basis on how you're doing it. And that's what I did, Anthony. I started creating goals for myself and trying to then see, could I attain those, and then having other people watch me and telling them this was what I was trying to accomplish so that way I could be accountable to them.
If your goal is to have your passive income to be more than your monthly expenses, then you need to check out our summer series, which is why we entitled it Your Path to Financial Freedom.
Our summer series consists of 3 webinars where we're bringing on industry experts to share some of the best passive income business models that we've come across. We are putting them all here together to help you build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
See you there.
Take care.
Yeah, we think goal setting is just super important, right? And I think that in part because that'll help you make better decisions, right? Whatever that goal is, whether it's financial or losing weight or spending more time with the family, whatever, if you have that goal, you can hold yourself accountable, and you can maybe, well, man, I really want to watch Netflix, but my goal is to do X. So it allows you to help you stay focused.
Well, here's the thing that I've learned too, and this is if finance is about trying to get to a point of financial freedom, and if financial freedom is spending more time with family, it's really time that we're after, right? Some people would say wealth is really a measure of time, meaning like if I had $1 million and I spent $100,000 a year, I've got 10 years of time. Mm-hmm. And so I was starting to think like, well, how much time am I getting every single week back? Because if that's what I'm after, like you just said, if your goal is to lose weight, you probably put a goal like, okay, I weigh 200 pounds, I want to become 180 pounds. Mm-hmm. Okay, well then I need to track that. Well, if the 180 for you is I would like to spend 10 more hours a week with my family, how are you doing it? Mm-hmm. Are you getting closer? So then you can start measuring your week. Is the activity I'm doing getting me closer to or further away from my goal? So that was one of the things I started tracking early on. It wasn't how much money I made. It was, am I getting closer to having more time with the people that I really want to spend time with?
Okay. Now, you had mentioned how you were saving. You push yourself to save money, and you're putting in these policies.
Right.
So now all this money is here inside your policies. How did you use that to create the passive income you have now?
Man, how much time do we have?
How much you need?
So we've invested in so many different things. We've been in short-term rentals, right? So where we go out, we find apartments. We will do a master lease, so we don't buy the building anymore. We actually rent the place from the owner, and then we will put it on Airbnb. We'll put it on VRBO, Booking.com. We have our own website, so if you're traveling to Birmingham, wake up in Birmingham.
Wait. So you guys are doing this on a whole apartment complex?
Yeah. So we have.
Interesting. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, so we go into apartment complexes and we'll sometimes get as many as 10 buildings or 10 apartments inside the buildings. Okay. And we use those where we'll then furnish the units. That's coming out of our pocket. So that's one of the places that I use cash is we furnish these apartments with really nice furniture, beds, all the stuff that goes into the kitchens. Most of us have traveled and used Airbnb. Mm-hmm. Well, that's been a major place that we've deployed cash. Another place that we've done it, we really love the land flipping concept. I know you guys have talked about the Land Geek. We're huge fans of the Land Geek. And we created a land flipping business where we were buying land, borrowing against our insurance policies, buying land at 25 to 30 cents on the dollar, and then turning around and selling it on a monthly note income. So those two ideas make up probably 70% of all the things that we do. The other things that we've done is we've gotten into crypto mining, we've gotten into e-commerce businesses, we've gotten into ATM investing. We do have some single family properties, we do have some multifamily stuff. But for us, it's about like finding something, spending some time in it. The things that we have the most money coming to us are the things that we've put the most effort into and that we have the most influence or control of.
You know what? To me, it just sounds like from where you began, and I don't know how far this goes, but probably till around 2008. So around 12, 14 years ago, you were mutual funds, IRA, 401k, stock market, and now you've pivoted a completely different direction. And how are you doing financially now compared to when you were trusting Wall Street?
Well, I will say this, that I'm financially free. My
Awesome.
passive income coming in every month equals, most months, not every month, but most months equals or exceeds my monthly expenses. Now, obviously, I have active income. I refer to that as my passion income. Like, I just love what I get to do for a living, and many of you probably listen to this, just love your job. So it's not like becoming financially free is not a way for you to quit working, because I believe we're producers, right? Mm-hmm. God created us to produce. And if you're, like me and you love doing what you do, that's passion income.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I would say is, when you have passive income, so that's what I've been able to create, then I do get to see things. We have created stuff. We've bought a lake house. And that lake house was an alternative to a 401k for us. Instead of putting money in there and getting the deferral and having to pay tax on the dollar going in, I bought a lake house and I got to not have to pay tax on the interest payments, right? Which was equivalent. The mortgage interest is equivalent to what I could have put in a 401k. And we held that house, and we had a lot of memories in that house, and our family grew together because it was a place for us to go. But also it was an investment, right? It was something that ultimately a few years ago, I sold it and I made a significant return. Now, I had to pay a lot of tax on it, but thankfully the tax was at capital gains rates, not ordinary income tax, which like 401ks do, right? So the things that I have grown, quote, wealthy in my opinion, is I'm really at the edge of almost being infinitely wealthy. Not that I have tons of money, but because my passive income on most months equals or exceeds my monthly expenses, remember I said the amount of money divided by how much you spend equals time? Mm-hmm. Well, if the amount of money coming in every month from your passive activities equals your monthly expenses, aren't you infinitely wealthy in time? And to me, that's the best gift that I can give to my kids, is showing them what I did so that they could do the same thing when I'm not here.
A lot of times and I get the same, we're so focused on the numbers, and, we want to be financially free, and we're focused on building the passive income. And we're just talking about really the dollars, but you've touched on it a little bit, and I'd like you to expand, like, how that helped the family. Like, for one, I'm hearing you got a lake house, right? Who would rather have a lake house or a 401k?
Lake house.
Right?
Yeah.
How has this impacted your family?
Well, I would say that I started where I went to work every single day, and I was away from my family. And, I went to an event. I'll kind of give you this story. This really changed my mind. You asked me about aha moments, and this was one. A couple of years ago, I go to this event, and I was around a group of people who had created truly passive income, residual businesses. And the more their business grew, the more income that came from the business that they really weren't actively having to work into, the more time they had with their families. And when I was sitting there with this group of individuals, that 7-8 figure entrepreneurs, and the troubles that they had were not the same troubles I had, right? Like they were concerned they were spending too much time with their kids. They were concerned their kids weren't getting, enough exposure to other things. And I was like, wait a second, I feel the opposite. Like I feel like in most of our worlds, the more successful we get, the less time we spend with family, not the more time. And so what I've seen, Anthony, as what's happened is that I've realized that I don't have to go 1,000 miles an hour in my passion income when I have that passive income supporting me. So I feel confident and comfortable when I want to take a week off or 2 weeks off to go spend time with the family, that I don't feel like that everything's going to fall apart, and that's a pressure that most of us have, that until we get to a point where we don't feel that have to, we don't feel free. And we sit there and we're checking our email constantly. We're checking tax. When we're on vacation, we're not really present. We're still back at work. And so for me, like recently, we actually did away with our office space. It gave me the ability to go to my office inside my house. And so regularly, my little 8-year-old son will come in there, bring me a glass of water, give me a hug, wave at somebody if I'm doing a Zoom call or whatever it is. And to me, that's amazing, right? Yeah. To be able to do the things that I wanted to do that way.
Now, let's talk, because you alluded with the kids. Now, so how are you teaching your kids these principles?
Well, one of the things recently, we were in our community, we taught a short-term rental mastermind, which we were just basically saying, here's what we're doing, right? We're not experts, but here's what we're doing. Here's the numbers of what we're producing, and here's what we've learned through this process. And I knew that my daughter was getting ready to turn 16, and I was like, she needs to find some way to create income, because what does every 16-year-old want, Cam? A car. And I knew that I didn't want to just pay for it for her. Because even though we have the money, even though I've been putting money into her life insurance policy, so I have 2 insurance policies on each one of my 4 kids, there was plenty enough cash there. But I needed to give her the ability to know that if she was going to use her cash value, she was going to have a way to replenish it. So I was like, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to go through this course together. And I want you to understand what's happening in this business. At the same time, I also gave her another book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad for Teens. And so I was helping her understand what really is an asset, what really is a liability. How do we create cash flow for ourselves? So I did actually a video on this, but the so what to it is basically we took a loan against her life insurance policy, went and bought her car. Then also took a life insurance policy and put it into the furniture into a 1-bedroom unit.
Nice.
The 1-bedroom unit, the last couple of months, after all management fees and all the stuff that we do to run the business, has produced somewhere between $800 and $1,000 a month. Well, that's enough to replenish for her car payment to herself, and it's also enough to replenish the amount of money that she borrowed for the furniture. And so in that process, I'm just showing her every decision that comes out of it. Another thing I would share, too, that I did, if it's okay, you want me to share another idea?
Well, just real quick, just to clarify, so you took a policy loan, and she has her own short-term rental. It's not yours.
It's hers.
It's hers.
Yeah, every single month she gets a distribution from it.
That's awesome.
Well, and so here's the thing, where I needed to create an income too, right? Like I want her to see this money as hers. And as a business owner, right, I have the ability to employ as many people as I can. And I feel, compelled to employ people that I love, right? Because I want to teach them. I want to be able to show them. So one of the things I did is I said, okay, we're going to do this short-term rental mastermind. We're going to read this book, and I want you to get on our podcast. I want you to share it with other parents. I want other parents to hear what you're doing so that it may inspire them to do the same thing with their kids. Well, did you know that you can pay someone up to $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month, and they don't have to pay federal income tax on it? And so that's what I did. I started paying her $1,000 a month. I put it in her checking account. Now, I made a little tweak here, is that up until that point, I'd been paying for all of her swim fees every single month, which is about $300 a month. All the event fees that she would go to, which would be a couple $100 every single time we went on that. And all the times that we traveled to those out-of-town events that would be $200 a night hotel rooms, I started paying for that out of that same account. So every time we go, she wants to go, or every time she wants to go buy a $450 swimsuit, which that's what those swimsuits cost, is crazy, is that I'm saying, okay, well, let's go get it out of your checking account. This is the money that you made last month as a part of being kind of a part of the marketing of our company. And she's like, wait a second. that comes out of my account? And I was like, it absolutely comes out of your account. Now, the beauty is, too, though, by paying her $1,000, $12,000 for the year, if a lot of the things that comes out of that account were things that I was having to pay for or was already paying for as a parent. And so I'd have to go make $16,000, $17,000 to net 12.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that I don't do that, I've got an extra $5,000, $6,000. Well, then that's the money I'm using to help fund her life insurance policies. So we found the way to basically pay for her life insurance premiums for free because of just the way that we're thinking differently with taxes. And I'm just doing lessons with them. I'll do YouTube videos with them. I'll share these stories with them. And not that they grasp everything, right? But just learning these things at such a young age will make them so much smarter in the way of how money works in the future.
Russ, I got a question. You kind of have been talking about your journey and kind of where you are right now, right? And you're kind of at the end, right? Passive income is equal or exceeding monthly expenses. Kind of in regards to that is, what would you say to somebody that's just getting started? Maybe somebody that's just hearing about this kind of strategy or this idea.
Well, first I thought you were making a joke about how old it was, because usually that's what my co-host does to me, right? So I'm not at the end, by the way. I'm at the beginning. I mean, maybe it's like a stair step to this guy. I don't know.
There you go.
And here's the thing. I would also say that I'm definitely continuing to learn.
Yeah.
One of my mentors gave this analogy, and I'll answer your question, but I love this example of realizing that we always have to keep learning. He would give an example where he'd take like a top to a water bottle, for instance, and he'd draw a circle around it. And he would say, everything inside that circle represents your knowledge. Everything that touches the edge of that circle represents what you don't know. Okay, so as you grow in knowledge, so let's just now take the whole water bottle and draw a circle around it. Then now what happened to what I know? It got bigger, right? Mm-hmm. But also, if everything that touches the edge of that ring represents what I don't know, it tells me the more knowledge I have, the more information I realize I don't know that I don't know. And so for me, is I am constantly learning, constantly trying to learn. So for someone who is trying to figure out how to create the first passive income, I would say first know who you are as an investor. You've got to invest in yourself. You got to really start to learn what opportunities fit who you are. And I'll give you an example. For me, I'm an extrovert. You can tell that because I'm wearing a pink shirt between two guys in blue. Right? and that means I like to influence. I like to be a part of things. And so short-term rental, for instance, even though I don't run that business, I'd be terrible running the business. But what I like about it is I can go on my Facebook or I can go on Instagram and I can share the new units that we come out with. I can talk to some of my real estate friends that are in town and say, hey, by the way, when you have a customer coming to town who needs a house until theirs is ready, or if you have an insurance person, hey, well, if one of your people's houses, gets flooded and they need a place to go, like I get to influence. And that's something I love, right? And when I was investing in Wall Street, I couldn't influence the outcome, right? I couldn't impact how much the share of Apple was going to be or Tesla or anything. Nobody can, but I realize I like that part of it. So I would say if you're just starting out, start to learn who you are as an investor. Learn the things that you can do, the things that you might be interested in doing. And there's a world. I mean, this podcast, you guys interview so many excellent guests that give so many ideas. So then try to match that against your personality profile and then go deep. Go deep on one of those things. The amount of money that you can spend. I'll give an example here. Mm-hmm. We had a guy that we got a chance to meet, and he came down and visited with us, and he was thinking that he was going to get into single-family properties. He's going to buy a rental property, put 20% down, start creating $300-400 a month cash flow. Mm-hmm. He was sitting there learning about, well, maybe as an investor, I want to be a little more active. I want to invest in myself, and he heard this podcast where this guy was teaching people how to buy apartment complexes, not just an individual property. He was saying, apartment complex is really just like 8 different things, just one roof all across them. So you got one roof instead of 8 roofs, right? You got all of this scale. And so he started learning how to do that. So what he did is took half of the 20% down payment that he was going to make into buying that one property, and he went and invested it into a course. He went and invested it into himself. And over about a period of 6 months, he went really deep, not only learning how to buy properties, also how to create and fund the properties by raising capital. he comes to us 2 years later, and he's telling us about how now he has 4 apartment complexes, almost 200 doors, bringing in a significant amount of cash flow. And he says, that would have never been possible had I not really started thinking about myself, started investing that money in myself. So there's an old adage that says if you're going to cut down a tree and you're given an hour to do it, you should spend the first 50 minutes sharpening the axe.
Yeah.
I think that's what we should do as investors. We should spend a lot of time sharpening our financial IQ.
Awesome. That's great, good stuff. What would you say to somebody who maybe they're on the fence about infinite banking?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what are you on the fence about, right? Are you on the fence that you don't feel like you can put money into this? Like, are you seeing this as an expense? Because I know that's probably the biggest obstacle I had personally when I first started this. I saw it like, this, and I thought, well, just like everything else in my life, I put some money in there, but I can't put too much because what happens if I need it back? Yeah. And I would say for you, just quit looking at it as an expense. Look at it more like a checking account. It's probably an oversimplification of what it is, but it's just a fancy checking account that we store cash in, that once we have access to cash, because this, in my opinion, is the greatest obstacle to becoming financially free, is not having access to cash. So when you put money in a place that you can access it, it allows you, gives you it forces you, if you will, to find a place to deploy it. So it makes you then go find courses like that individual Larry I was just telling you about, who now is buying apartment complexes. It was because he had money. If that money had been in a 401k, he would have never thought about that. It would have never even come up, because he would have never even considered having access to money to go buy a course, right? All of his money typically is put away from us. But when you get into infinite banking, it's a lot more than life insurance. It's a process, and understanding that. So if you want to take control of your life, I would say this is the thing. Get a bunny hill policy. Like, just start. It doesn't matter. Like, the number one thing, and we all know this, right? Yeah. The number one thing, the number one complaint is, I wish I would have put more in. Yeah. But I always say that's fine. If everyone we talk to says, well, man, if I knew what I know now, I would have put more in. It's like, well, that means everybody's going to have to go through that, because there's this fundamental flaw of us not understanding it. But once you try it and you use it, then you start to see, oh, that makes a lot more sense. So for me, I would say if that's probably the biggest struggle, then just start small. Don't worry about, like starting this humongous amount, because I have almost 25. I almost have 25 whole life policies. I'm weird, right? But that is one of those things where once I've understood it, like, I just kept adding more life insurance policies, because I kept finding places to create more cash. And the more cash I had to have a place to store it. And there's no better place to store it, in my opinion, than dividend paying whole life insurance.
Well said. No better way to end it right there.
I agree.
As always, Russ Morgan, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Let me go.
Now go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.